Welcome back to another episode of All or Not According to Jack with your host, Jack Toledano. I know it's been a couple of weeks since my last recordings. I talked about the top songs of Iron Maiden and The Who, and then I took a little bit of a hiatus, between feeling a little under the weather and sustaining a thumb injury, which now it's gotten better, thank God. Uh, what else happened? I actually have a new tooth. Yeah. Can you believe it? Yeah. So, what else? Yeah, feeling under the weather, a lot of traveling upstate to my second home, trying to get some stuff done and, enjoy the summer a little bit, not work so hard. But in the meantime, while I was up there for an entire week, I had wheels are always spinning for show ideas. And I just happened to be watching, flipping around on the Peacock, you know, app and, seeing all the wrestling content. I saw this content called 20 Years Too Soon, Superstar Billy Graham. Well, he had just passed away, and I thought I missed the boat to talk about him, but ironically, today, June 7th, is actually his birthday. So, so sorry for superstar Billy Graham. Came so close to another birthday, and we lost him. I think it was what, May 17th, something like that. So I watched this great documentary called 20 Years Too Soon, Superstar Billy Graham. And you know what? I, I knew some things about him. I remember when I started to watch wrestling back in, I don't know, 75, 76, when it was still uh, back when the cable TV was first starting to become a thing, and you had the old Gerald boxes with, the wired cable box, and you had like 20 buttons that you can push. And at that time, you can get the Philadelphia station and you can watch, the syndicated WWE territory wrestling that way. Or in New York, you could watch it Friday night or Saturday night at midnight on WOR Channel 9. And I do remember back then, and, you know, wrestling was a lot different. Those shows basically, it was basically a weekly advertisement for the big card coming up each month at either, I don't know, the Philadelphia Spectrum, the Boston Gardens, or especially Madison Square Garden here in, New York City. So they would have in that hour of wrestling, they would maybe have 4 or 5 squash matches and a bunch of, interviews for upcoming house shows. And we'll talk about the house shows that I used to go to at Nassau Coliseum. But my first memory of Superstar Billy Graham was when they had put him in a tag team with another former champion, the Russian Bear, Ivan Koloff, who little did I know, he's actually not Russian. He's a Canadian wrestler who maybe, I don't know, maybe went to a linguist to perfect that Russian accent, but whatever. I digress. So talking about this hour and a half full length feature film about superstar Billy Graham. So a little bit of history. So not going to get into his really early history, but he started lifting weights at the behest of his brother, doing with him, which was really, really a big thing for him. Uh, he then went to tried out for the CFL late '60s, I believe it was. I think he played for a team in Calgary like 1 year, but didn't really work out. So 1969, he was persuaded to try out for Stu Hart's wrestling in Calgary, the Calgary Stampede. I think that's what it was called. So he ended up training in the famous Stu Hart dungeon. If if does that beat all? being stretched to death by this maniacal man who I got to give him credit, produced a lot of talent. Bret Hart, uh, Davy Boy Smith, Dynamite Kid, uh, Chris Jericho, among others. So yeah, so Stu Hart then had him, because he already had this $1 million body. He had him go and do this arm wrestling gimmick where he'd arm wrestle people. So and then he wrestled in the Calgary area for a little while. Then he met somebody named Dr. Jerry Graham, a wrestler, who persuaded him to go wrestle in the Native American reservations in Arizona, because they love wrestling. Then he was persuaded to go to the LA territory, the LA NWA territory. Did some more arm wrestling. Arm wrestled against one famous, classy Freddie Blassie, who beat him. So then he went to the San Francisco territory. He met and became a tag team partner of the famous Pat Patterson. Uh, Famous if you followed WWE wrestling all these years. He was a wrestler, then a commentator, then a road agent, and a coach to all the younger wrestlers. Actually jobbed for China one time, of all things. Then he went to the Minneapolis territory where he met one Ray the Crippler Stevens. I think he tagged with him, became a friend of his. I actually met Ray the Crippler Stevens, who came into my electronics store that I worked at in Hicksville, Long Island, of all places. Guy was even shorter than me, if you could believe that. Yet they called him the Crippler. Tough guy. So also met Dusty Rhodes, High Chief Peter Maivia, Rocky Johnson, all names I'll talk about in time. He met his wife Valerie in Tampa. I gotta say, he was very faithful to her. You know, good guy. Didn't never strayed from his wife. Um, so then, as he started slowly build his reputation as a strong man and an attraction, you know, let's bring up a picture if we may. So if you'll see what I mean, there you go. This picture doesn't really do it justice, but he wore some very colorful, skin tight outfits. There was a picture of him posing on the second rope with a belt draped over his shoulder with the skin tight, top and bottom. I wanted that picture, but I couldn't find it. So moving right along. So then early to mid 70s, got the call from Vince McMahon Sr. to come to WWF. At the time it was called Worldwide Wrestling Federation. Say that 5 times fast. And yeah, so my first memory was he wrestling with, being a tag team partner with Ivan Koloff. I remember that tag team broke down. One time they started some infighting, and Captain Lou Albano jumped in the ring to try and break it up, and one of them knocked him on his ass. It was the funniest thing. I don't remember exactly who, but and then I remember uh, they had the unfortunately had to face Haystacks Calhoun and Kevin Sullivan, and Haystacks Calhoun proceeded to crush them both, and you know, they lost, and I think that was it for them. But they split them up, and they went their own way. And about that time, superstar Billy Graham was gaining momentum, and even as a heel, people were cheering for him. They liked him. He was a very colorful character. Uh, so Vince McMahon. Well, I'm not going to mix my notes up. So then he left. He came back. Meanwhile, Bruno Sammartino, who was now in his second title reign, he lost it in after about 8 years to Ivan Koloff. a man that behind the scenes he actually picked as his successor to beat him, because he needed a break. He needed to take some time off. I'm sure 8 years of traveling really takes its toll. So took some time off. Then they gave the belt so Ivan Koloff had it for a month. Then they gave it, they had, at that time, there was always face champions. So they gave it to, so Ivan Koloff was told to drop the belt to Pedro Morales. So Pedro held it for about a year and a half. Then, you know what? As good as he wasn't drawing like Bruno was. So they persuaded Bruno to take the belt back. So Pedro Morales allowed himself to take a heart punch from one Stan Stasiak. Stan Stasiak won the belt. Then 10 days later, he lost it back to Bruno Sammartino. So Bruno then held it for another, at the time, he had told Vince Sr., yeah, I'll hold it for a year or two. A year or two became 3 years. So by 1976, got slammed on his head mistakenly by Stan the Lariat, or the bounty hunter from Borger, Texas, Stan Hansen. Gave him a botched body slam, broke his neck, and a trooper that he was out for a month or two, came back, beat Stan Hansen a couple times, once at Shea Stadium, once in a steel cage. But by that time, it was winding down. He needed to drop the belt again. And he told Vince Sr., yeah, this is it. I got to drop it once and for all. But this time, he didn't pick his champion. Rumor has it that he wanted to pick Ken Patera to succeed him. But Vince Sr. said, well, let's put it on superstar Billy Graham. So I guess instead of having him lose to Superstar at Madison Square Garden or any of the big arenas, they had him lose in Baltimore, Maryland, in a less packed house. I guess there's less likely to have a riot on your hands. So April 30th, 1977, feet on the ropes, he beats Bruno. So Vince McMahon said at the time that, he was ahead of a time. People were just not really ready for him. People, even though he was a heel, people liked to go to his matches. He did a very good job selling those main events at the Garden. He ended up being a champion from April 30th, 77 to end of February 78, while they were trying to train and get ready. One Bob Backlund, who would succeed him as another face champion. But, I feel for him because, and we'll get into it, but basically, there are those that say that Hulk Hogan basically stole his whole, not his demeanor, but his whole shtick. And he took it to really big heights in the 80s. Who knew what superstar Billy Graham could have done? While we're at it, let's bring up another picture. This is another man that I love, the Grand Wizard. What amazing, amazing promos this guy cut in tandem with superstar Billy Graham. I mean, he never interfered in matches, but he was funny as shit. We'll talk about some of the things he said. So some other comments. Hulk Hogan. I want to be just like him. Yeah, you did. And you had all the success to go with it. Dusty Rhodes. Hogan and Ventura were clones of superstar Billy Graham. Reign ended too short. Back then, they only faced champions, as I said. Or superstar. He was so hurt and upset that he had to drop his belt to Bob Backlund. He took a hiatus, went home, started taking painkiller drugs, messed him up for a couple of years. So then he came back again. I think it was around 1980, probably in the middle of Bob Backlund's reign. Was it 80? No, 81, 82. Yeah, we'll get to that. So he didn't want to do his superstar shtick any longer. He came back with a new martial arts gimmick. He had a shaved head. Uh, his Some of his muscle mass had deteriorated. He was skinny arms, kind of like I have. Uh, you know, uh, Actually, yeah, I'll talk about my memories of seeing him in live, but I'll talk about that soon. Left again, came back as a face in the mid '80s. Even Bruno was singing his praises. Uh, had a hip replacement, came back again, but you know what? He tried to wrestle. You could see he really loved his fans, but unfortunately couldn't do it anymore. The injuries just took their toll. So instead, they had him become Don Morocco's manager for a little while. Then he did some commentating. I guess, you know what, didn't work out so well. He's got a good voice, but as a color commentator, but maybe wasn't the right fit. Contracted hepatitis C, received a liver transplant in 2002 from a 26-year-old young lady who unfortunately lost her life in a car accident. I will admit, I was in tears when I saw that part. But, in a nutshell, check it out. Really, really great documentary. Um, he was born Eldridge Wayne Coleman Jr. Uh, so my memories of his title reign. So during his title reign as champion WWE from April 77 to Feb 78, his challengers, Gorilla Monsoon, Bruno Sammartino, a few rematches, uh, Tony Garea, Larry Zbyszko, one very memorable one, Ivan Putski, Neil Mascaris, another very memorable one against Dusty Rhodes, Samoan High Chief Peter Maivia. Uh, he had a very famous, I think it was in December or January, famous champion versus NWA champ Harley Race down in Florida in the NWA territory. That match went to a 1 hour draw. And then, of course, his last title defense, he dropped the belt to Bob Backlund. So my memories of actually seeing him live, first time, only time I saw him as champion was sometime in mid '77, probably the summer of '77. Uh, so at the Nassau Coliseum, basically he had an open challenge. It was first match of the night was, I don't know, a 20 to 25 man over the top rope battle royal. And whoever would win that match would win $5,000 and a shot at his title. So as it turned out, he had beaten Gorilla Monsoon at the Garden, beat him clean. At the time, as a kid, I couldn't conceive how did this 275-pound man basically squash a 400-pound giant. But as it turned out, Gorilla Monsoon won the Battle Royal, so he would face Superstar that night at Nassau Coliseum. And the way that match finished, didn't pin him clean this time. Instead, uh, Gorilla Monsoon's leg got tangled in the top rope and the second rope, and then he fell back over the top rope and he was dangling out of the ring. So back at that time, they wouldn't just let it, you'd think they'd freaking let his leg go, help him get his leg off the rope, let him fall to the ground, and then start counting. No, idiot referee, while he's dangling outside the ring, caught in the rope, 1, 2, counted a did the count out to 10, and he lost by count out, and of course, superstar Billy Graham retained. But back then, they never dropped the title at Nassau Coliseum because they were house shows. I don't think the title changed hands until many years later when they started televising live Raws and SmackDowns at the Nassau Coliseum. I think an Intercontinental Championship changed hands there years later. So that was my first memory of me seeing Superstar Billy. So the second time, and this was my first time ever going to a Madison Square Garden card. That was the famous card where Jimmy Superfly Snuka had been injured by, we talked about him earlier, Ray the Crippler Stevens, who gave him not one, but two pile drivers on the concrete floor, uh, carried out on the stretcher, out for a couple months, uh, doing everything they could to basically turn him face and give him crowd sympathies. So I saw the famous return bout where he finally came back, finally got his comeuppance against Ray the Crippler Stevens. Of course, that match sucked because it was only 7 minutes, and I guess Stevens wouldn't allow himself to be pinned by Snuka. But again, flopped out over the top rope and got counted out. So, but also that night, it was Superstar Billy Graham against challenging Bob Backlund for the title. This match was very interesting. It was actually a lumberjack match, as you had wrestlers surround the ring, and if a wrestler fell out of the ring, they got beaten up, stomped, whatever, by people outside the ring, and then thrown back into the ring. So, and the other caveat was that there was a special guest referee, um, Swede Hansen, who was kind of in the days before Stone Cold Steve Austin you know had shades of gray, where he was not really a bad guy, but not really a good guy. He's basically a bad guy who beat up on other bad guys. So that was kind of Swede Hansen's thing, way back in the past. So Bob Backlund in interviews didn't really trust him, but at the end of the day, he, Bob Backlund put Graham in the chicken wing. That's a move where you have your arm behind your put behind your back, and it's so excruciatingly painful. And Swede Hansen actually did the right thing and called for the bell to ring, and Graham lost by submission. So, so then after the match, Graham attacked Swede Hansen. They had a match next month, and Graham beat him by pulling out a foreign object and hitting him under the throat. So another famous, this was a match that I saw at, and this is something that you can watch if you go back to Peacock, and they have they have this thing called WWE Old School, and I'm going to talk about this now. I'm going to talk about this in my next episode. It is great. It contains a lot of those old WWE cards, monthly cards, before the days of pay-per-view. They had these big cards either at Madison Square Garden, uh, once a month at the Philadelphia Spectrum, or at the Boston Gardens. Um, so one of those matches, they had what they called a Texas bull rope match. So by this time, and this was after Graham lost the title to Backlund. So at this time, Graham and Dusty, they were 1-1. Dusty beat him the first time, where Graham got, got a back body drop over the top rope and didn't beat the 10 count back into the ring. So Dusty Rhodes won, but he didn't win the title because you can't win by count out. So the second time, Texas death match, grueling match. Both men passed out. Graham just draped his arm over Dusty and won that way. So the third match was a Texas bull rope match with a cowbell tied to the bull rope. And the special guest referee of that match was one Chief J Strongbow. So I remember the interview very well, where uh, Graham Wizard said, "You see, McMahon, the superstar's gonna take care of the fat, tidy bull man while I keep my eye on that miserable Indian referee. We don't mind the match as much as we mind having Strongbow in there." So, so Dusty Rhodes ended up winning that match, a very gruesome match. Both men busted open. So after the match, another promo by the Grand Wizard. So Chief J, how do you like that car that you're driving around that Dusty bought you? Insinuating that he paid off Chief J Strongbow. Too funny. So that's about all I have. But anyway, check it out. It is a great documentary. Uh, you will be missed. I bless the day that Vince McMahon decided to call you back and put you in their virtual Hall of Fame. I really wish they would create one up in Stanford that people can go see it. Would be a cool thing. Sell some merchandise, have it be like a Canton, Ohio type deal. I think you do well. These wrestlers deserve it. They really bust their ass for you, Vince. So, rest in peace, superstar. I really wish that you had more of a run at it, kind of like, instead of having somebody like Hulk Hogan steal your gimmick and make millions of dollars in the 80s like he did. Have those great WrestleManias with Andre the Giant and so on and so forth, and Ultimate Warrior and Macho Man Randy Savage. Should have been you, superstar. This is Jack Toledano speaking for all and not according to Jack. Have a good one, folks. Stay tuned for more wrestling content. And hopefully this weekend I'm going to record my next top metal by year for the year 2012. So be well. See you soon. Bye.